Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H Virtual Event Space. Today is part one of an exciting three-part series we're doing with Focusrite, Mastering the Art of Music Creation. Today, part one, we're discussing igniting the creative spark. We got the creative spark going in the green room. Unfortunately, you guys weren't there for that, but when I start with high energy, it means we had a good green room session. John D. Nicola from Focusrite joining us. John, welcome. Good to have you.
Hey, thanks, Derek. Good to be here.
Well, look, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know nothing about creating music. I know nothing about anything to do with music production. So I'm going to be trying to get my creative spark on from off camera. And if you guys do have any questions on anything, feel free to get them in. For those of you joining us on YouTube, Vimeo, you can drop it right in the comments section. If you do not know about our YouTube page, that is where we archive all of our live content. So go over to YouTube, check out B&H Event Space on there. John, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll see you in a bit for some Q&A.
All right, sounds good. Thanks a lot. All right, everybody. It's good to be here today. And as Derek said, we're going to be talking about all things creating music. So we're going to, and this is a three-part series. And so as Derek said, this is part one, where we're going to be igniting the creative spark. So we're going to come up with a song idea or the beginnings of a song idea, and we're going to start working that into a full production. So before we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about recording and the equipment that you need and all of that good stuff as well. So for this, we're going to be recording and working on a computer, of course. I'm going to be using a Mac, but you can do this on a Windows computer as well. And so that's the first thing that you're going to need to get started. And then we're also going to be using an audio interface. And so I'm here, I'm a product specialist with Focusrite, and Focusrite creates and makes audio interfaces. Everything from our Scarlett line, which starts around $100, $150, all the way up to our professional Red series of interfaces, which are in studios and live and found in studios and live performances around the world. And so we're going to be using our Focusrite Scarlett interface and a computer and some of the software that's included to go ahead and start creating a song from scratch. So in this first part, we'll open up the software, we'll see how to get started, and next part and next week we're going to get into kind of mixing the track and arranging it, and then in the final session in a couple of weeks from now, we'll talk about mastering the final product and how we can get that distributed on the streaming services and things like that. So let's get right into it. So today I'm going to be using the Scarlett 2i2, the 4th gen Scarlett 2i2. And again, that's an audio interface, and that's basically allowing me to get audio in and out of my computer. So you can see I have a little USB-C plug here, and that's coming out into the back of my audio interface. And then I can plug my guitar cable. I also have my microphone plugged into the back here, and that's going into USB into my computer. And then my playback from the computer comes out of here into my headphones. And then I also have speakers plugged in here I can use as well, although I won't be using those today. And so audio interfaces, as part of them, all have a few different components that are in common. They all have a preamp, like from microphone preamp, instrument level preamp, and that basically takes the signal and brings it up to a suitable level to be converted from analog to digital. And then they have analog to digital and digital to analog converters. So those are the two main components in a lot of in audio interfaces primarily. And then you'll find, differences between them are going to be, some of them have different extra features as well. So, looking at the Scarlett 2i2, for example, I have some fun features like auto gain and clip safe. We'll show you how those work a little bit later. We have an air mode on here that kind of changes the sound of the input, and we'll talk about how the benefits of all that a little bit later. Again, the interface also is going to allow us not only to record, but also to get high quality playback as well. So let's just get right into it. We're going to be working in Pro Tools today. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go. And we're going into Pro Tools. I'm going to go to a new session here. And we're going to go, let's just get me out of the way. We're going to just name this live stream so we have something. And when you're setting up a session, just take note of a few things down here on the bottom. You probably don't need to change any of these, but your sample rate, this is like the quality basically that you're working with. 44.1 or 48K is perfectly fine. That's going to be the quality you're typically using for streaming and things like that. So we're just going to leave all these settings alone here. One thing I would make sure you're always doing in your software is recording in 24-bit. This is going to give you extra dynamic range, which is the difference between your quieter and louder parts of the recording. So 24-bit and then 48 kilohertz, 44.1. It's a good standard place to start. So I'm going to go ahead and create a session. And especially in Pro Tools, it kind of gives you a blank slate. So I'm using Pro Tools. Actually, this is the intro version of Pro Tools, which is free. Scarlets do include the 3 months of the Pro Tools artist subscription, which is going to open up more tracks, additional MIDI and audio tracks for you so you can build bigger sessions. But the intro version is free and you can use it in perpetuity. And so I'm going to be using that along with a bunch of the virtual instruments and plugins and software that comes with the Focusrite Scarlett. So I'll point out all the different things that we're using as we go. So to get started, I have this new session here. And before we get going, I just want to mention I did say this is Pro Tools, but everything I'm going to be showing you today would apply to pretty much any DAW as well. And when I say DAW, I mean a digital audio workstation. And so this is going to be any type of program that allows you to manipulate audio, like Pro Tools, Logic Pro, GarageBand, for example. All of those are digital audio workstations. Ableton Live also, Ableton Live Lite also comes with Scarlett interfaces as well. And there we go. So all DAWs basically are going to have the same level of audio quality. And so when you're choosing one, it's really going to be about the workflow that works for you. So, you know, kind of what brings out the best in you as a producer or engineer or musician. And so that being said, let's get into setting up a session here. So now that we're here in Pro Tools, before we get started, the last thing we just want to mention is that we want to make sure we're utilizing the audio interface for our audio. So we don't want to be playing audio and recording through our laptop speakers. So we're going to go to the setup menu, and in Pro Tools, we're going to go to playback engine, but you'll find this in the preferences of most DAWs. And we're going to just make sure that we have our Scarlett selected. So you don't want to be using your internal microphone or speakers or anything like that. And so yeah, just make sure you have that set up, which we already do. And then we're good to go. Any audio will be coming to and from our Scarlett interface. So now we can get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to add a click track so that I have something to play to. And so that's just going to be a metronome. And I'm going to go to track and create click track. And as soon as I do that and I hit play, you can hear I now have a click track playing there. Pretty simple. So that's a 120 BPM tempo. I would like my tempo to be a little bit faster than that. So I'm going to go to the tempo area here, and I'm just going to punch in 132. And that's the tempo I was working with a little bit earlier for this track. And so that's what I'm going to go with. So now that I've changed that, you can hear our tempos counting off a little bit faster there. Great. So now let's get going and get some instruments going and some music. So I'm going to start off with I'm just going to lay down a chord progression with my keyboard just to have something to play to. So I'm going to start with keyboard, and then maybe we'll go in and add some drums, and then we'll talk about actually recording some guitar parts, and we'll go through how to record and all that kind of fun stuff. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to add a new track, and this is going to be a stereo instrument track. So there's two main tracks you're going to use. There's a few of them here in Pro Tools, as you can see, but the two main tracks you want to be aware of are audio track and instrument track. And audio tracks are going to be actual audio. So if I was going to record this my vocal right now, I would create an audio track. An instrument track is going to allow me to play software instruments with my controller, my keyboard controller that we have right over here. So I'm going to go ahead and add this instrument track. It's a stereo track. And there it is. I'm going to rename this to keys. And over here is where I can insert the instrument I want to use. Because right now, if I record and enable this track and I go to play, of course, there's nothing attached to it, so you won't hear any sound. So what I need to do is go ahead and insert an instrument. So I'm going to go to my multi-channel plugins, instrument, and I'm going to go to Addictive Keys. Addictive Keys is included with the Focusrite Scarlett interfaces, and it basically just gives you a really nice grand piano grand sound, studio grand sound. And so that's yeah, so a lot of DAWs will include a grand piano sound of some kind as well, but it's this Addictive Keys is a really nice professional sounding instrument for your tracks. So we're going to start with this, and we'll just work out a little chord progression. So earlier I was doing this D, C, G, and A. So I'm going to lay down those chords with the metronome playing. So let's go ahead. You can see my keyboard action here. I already have this track record armed. So that's another thing when you're getting ready to record. If I don't click this little R button here and I try to hit record and play, I don't have any tracks enabled, so I won't be able to record anything. So I can fix that by going over to my keys, engaging that, and then now that that track is here, I can hear the keys and I can go ahead and record. So let's go ahead and try to lay down some chords here. So I have that record armed. I can go up here and hit record on the transport, which is being covered up right now. I can do that from my mouse, but I'm going to use the keyboard since I'm already using the keyboard controller. So here we go, record, and then when I hit play, it'll count me off. Okay. Now I think those were mostly on time. That last one was a little bit quieter, but so let's take a listen to it real quick and hear what we have. Okay, that's actually pretty good. So I'm going to just zoom in a little bit here, and I can edit this MIDI information, these notes, by double clicking, and it brings up the Pro Tools MIDI editor here. Now, I didn't explain earlier, but MIDI is basically MIDI notes for our purposes is data that tells the instruments, the virtual instruments, what notes to play. So you can see I have my 3 notes in my D chord right here. And everything I played gets recorded as this MIDI file. What's nice about MIDI is that it's super easy to manipulate. So I have all these automatically highlighted right now, and I'm going to control click or right click and go to my event operations and go to the quantize menu. What quantize is going to allow me to do is, you can see on the grid here that I'm slightly off where I was playing the notes. And so quantize is going to allow me to just snap everything right to the grid so it's a little bit tighter. Now there's a bunch of different settings here for quantize. You basically can choose, what the sensitivity of the quantization is, and if you wanted to add a little bit more human feel to it with swing and things like that. These are pretty simple chords. I shouldn't need to do any of that. I'm just going to hit apply. And you can see that my notes shifted, and if I hit play, we're going to be right on with that click track. And that's pretty good. The only thing here is that these 3 notes are a little bit quiet. So I'm going to select those and just drag the volume up right here. So Pro Tools makes it very easy to go ahead and kind of tweak your MIDI notes once you've recorded them. So let's check that out again. And now you can hear they're all the same volume. All right, so now we have a 4-bar, basically a 2-bar chord progression there to start off with. And I know that I'm not a big fan of listening to a click track. So the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and grab some real drums that we can put in here. And then we'll start to layer some guitars on top of it and start making this feel like a real song. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn the metronome off over here in the top right corner. And then I'm going to insert another track, a new stereo instrument that we're going to use for addictive drums. So we'll call this drums. And we're going to have to go ahead and insert addictive drums here. So we're going to go to instrument and addictive drums. Now, from here, addictive drums is a virtual instrument, just like the addictive keys, that has a lot of great drum sounds in it. So the version that is included with the Scarletts, with the Hitmaker expansion, is our Studio Rock kit. And so right now is playing my keyboard because that's what was enabled. So what I'm going to do is, actually, I'll do it from the keyboard this time. I'm going to go ahead and enable the keyboard track and enable the drum track. And now I could play drums from the keyboard, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not a very good finger drummer with the pads, but you could do that. What I'm going to do instead is Addictive Drums has a lot of great MIDI clips that are available here that you can choose from. So just different beats. So if I can try out this one, for example, all different styles. That's a rock beat there, a jazz beat, some hip hop tracks. So you could pick the beat that you want, and then you can go through and change the kit if you wanted to, change the snare drum, for example. So you can kind of customize it from there. So yeah, I'm going to use one of these beats. Oh, there we go. And the one I earlier chose was one of these American rock beats. Let's see, number 11, I believe. So let's go ahead and take this one. Yeah, there we go. So that's a nice open hi-hat sound, so we can use that for a chorus. The other one that they give us with the similar is is a closed hi-hat. So maybe we'll use that for a verse later on. Let's start off with this hi-hat open, and we'll drag this in here and see how that fits with our chords. All right, already a lot better, more exciting with some drums in there. So we are already starting to get a feel for a nice little rock song here that we can put together. And so what is a rock song without guitars? So that's going to be the next thing we'll get into. And that's going to give us a chance to talk a little bit about actual recording. So let's get right into the guitars. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my guitar from over here. Today I'm going to be using my just regular Fender Strat over here, and I have this plugged into the Scarlett as I mentioned earlier, so right in over here on the first input. And so whenever you're going to record a guitar plugged directly into your interface, you want to make sure that the interface is has the instrument mode selected for that input. Some interfaces will label this as high Z. We have it labeled as instrument here, and that's going to adjust the preamp so that it's ready for the guitar sound. So let's go ahead, and now that we have that set up, I'm going to create a track so that you can visually see what's going on, and then we'll set levels and all that stuff. So first thing we need to do is we're going to go to new track. We're going to go with mono this time. Now the reason why we're going to go mono is because the input source is mono. So we are going to hear it in both speakers. It's just going to be the same input in both speakers. So if we were recording something like maybe a stereo keyboard that had a left and right output and we were using both of these inputs, then maybe we could use a stereo track in that scenario. But here we're going to be using a stereo or a mono track. So we'll call this guitar 1. And there it is. And now right away, because I have input 1 selected here, so that's another thing. You always need to make sure you select the correct input. So right now, if I go to input 2, for example, and I hit record, you can probably hear my voice doubled up there. But yeah, so I want to make sure this is input 1, so that is my guitar. So now when I have input 1 selected and I enable this to record, you can hear the guitar coming through here, albeit a little bit low. So let's get the level set on a guitar. So first we inserted the track, we set it for input 1, which is automatically already set up for us. And then we hit the record enable button in order to hear the guitar. So awesome. So now let's get the level set. So I'm going to take a look at the interface here, and you can see I'm playing here on this number 1. You can see, and I'll also pull up the control software, so you can kind of see it on there as well. So my guitar is number 1. So it's pretty low. So what I'm going to do is I could just set the gain here myself, but I'm going to use auto gain and try that out. So I'm going to hit the auto button here, and I'm going to play along to this and have it set the level for me. So let's try that out. Okay, so it just gave us a little bit of extra level there. So let's hear that. Let's try that one more time. Okay, so auto gain went ahead and set my level kind of on the lower side, and that's because it wants to give you a lot of headroom. So when you're recording, a lot of people think that when you're first starting out, that you need to be peaking really close to 0, kind of like my microphone is right now. And that's not necessarily the case, and that's because of that 24-bit recording I mentioned earlier. So there's a lot of, basically you have a lot of headroom in 24-bit recording, and so you can basically look to peak around -12 or around -18 or so. And that's exactly where the auto gain is setting us. You see if I play a little bit here, we're kind of right in that wheelhouse, which is the level that the plugins that we're going to be using downstream are expecting. So that's what we want. Now my microphone is turned up a little bit louder so that you can hear it on the live stream. So that's why we're peaking a little bit higher there. But this is a perfect level for guitar. So now we're pretty much ready to record, but this sound that we have here, it's a really nice clean sound, but it's a little bit dull. You know, this might work for some things, maybe a nice smooth R&B song or something like that. But for the most part, you're going to want a little bit more gain on that. So what we're going to use is a guitar amp simulator plugin. And what that does is it kind of emulates all the different aspects of a guitar amp that you're not getting because we're plugging directly into an interface. Specifically, the sound of the guitar actually going through a speaker. And so the plugin is going to emulate that and make the guitar sound a lot more natural. So the plugin we're going to use for that today is the Marshall Silver Jubilee plugin from Softtube. And it's under the harmonic menu here in Pro Tools. Now there's giving me a choice here, mono or mono 2 stereo. So some plugins like amp modelers and such allow you to take a mono signal that's just, a one single track, and it can turn it into a stereo signal because the amp plugin itself has, reverb and effects and things like that. So it's going to give you a much wider sound. I would generally recommend doing that. So let's try that out. So now we have the guitar amp plugged in here, and we have a little bit more gain happening, and let's just hear it. So you can hear that's, a lot more natural sounding of a guitar sound. Even if we go to a more clean sound, for example, this, let's see, a clean, dry mono sound here. It's just a lot more natural sounding. So enough of me talking. Let's go ahead and lay down some chords. We're going to start with a clean guitar sound, and then we'll add some dirtier sounds on top of it. So let's give it a shot. We're all ready to go. All right. So in order to hear that, we're just going to turn the record arm off and play it back. All right, so that's a good start for a clean sound. And let's see here. Now I'm going to take this piano keyboard sound and actually just click in Option and drag it over so we have the keys on both bars there. And okay, and then the next thing we'll do is we'll get another guitar track and we'll add a little bit of dirty sound on top to make it a little bit more of a wider sound. So I'm going to go to Track, New. We'll go to Mono again, Audio. We'll just say Guitar 2. So we have Guitar 2. We're going to insert our Softtube plugin. Okay. And we'll hit record. Oh. Now, in that case, I had the wrong input selected, so it was trying to put my voice through the guitar amp. Not ideal. So remember to always pick select the proper input there. And so now I can enable this track and... All right, so we'll go this more distorted sound here. I'm also going to change the pickup on my guitar to the bridge pickup. And let's try a different preset here. I'm going to go with the edgy barky preset. And I'll turn this down a little bit for the recording part, and let's give it a try. Whoop. Let's go back and do that from the beginning of the track. I'm going to hit enter there and try again. All right. So now, like I said earlier, I'm going to pan these a little bit opposite of each other and give it a playback. All right, so we got the two parts laid down right there. And let's take a look here. We got so we got our two guitar parts here. We have a nice a keyboard part here with the chords. Let's bring that in here. And so we got a little bit of a track coming in here. Now, let's see if we wanted to do another thing. What would be missing next? I would say probably bass guitar. So we'll get into that next. First, I'm just going to go to my mixer window, which is Command equal, and I'm going to just balance this out a little bit so we don't have a crazy mix happening. All right, cool. So that's a pretty good start for now. And of course, we can go ahead and add more things on top of that. In fact, let's go ahead and before we do a bass sound, I'm going to add a let's grab that acoustic guitar behind me, and we'll add that in too. Why not? So let's go ahead and grab that. All right. So now for this case, I'm going to plug the guitar in. Of course, a lot of times you may want to mic an acoustic guitar, especially if it's a solo performance. But a lot of times in a more dense mix, sometimes plugging in a guitar in sounds pretty good as well. So let's go ahead and we'll auto gain this up. Let's see. Press our auto gain. All right, you can see it brought us our gain up a little bit louder there. So let's go ahead and create a track for this guitar. We're going to make a mono track, call it acoustic. There it is. And we'll hit the record enable on input 1. So now you can hear that. Now, that's a pretty nice break sound. So we have our air mode on from before, which I didn't mention earlier, but on the electric guitar, I was using my harmonic drive on the air mode to get a little bit more out of the amp simulators. But that's a little bit crispy and bright for this acoustic, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for now. And maybe just use our regular air mode, which gives a nice little presence boost, but without the harmonic drive. And yeah, let's go ahead and add that in, see how it sounds. Whoop. Make sure we do it from the beginning, and there we go. All right, let's give that a listen here. All right, so now we have a nice full sound there with a bunch of different guitars happening, and we can kind of arrange that later in the next part and as we build the song out. But we have a lot to work with here to get started. So that's a really cool start with the acoustic. So the last thing I want to do as far as building the track goes is let's get a bass sound going. So just allow me to go ahead and we'll take this record enable off so you don't hear me unplug the guitar. And it's going to put this back real quick. Okay. And so the last thing, like I said, is we're going to add a bass sound to this. So I'm just going to take a quick look at the chat. I see we have a couple of questions in here about recording with an iPhone or iPad. Best app for that. It's probably, I don't do a whole lot of recording on my phone or iPad, but I do know that, I mean, GarageBand is awesome for that. A lot of people may think it's a more basic app, but especially in the last few years, it's become super powerful. So I think that's a really great place to start. And then if you're looking for something a little bit more advanced, I think, I believe Cubase has an app version out now as well. But yeah, I just always recommend GarageBand. It's a great place to start. And you can also use, as far as an interface goes for your phone, you can use our Scarlett interfaces with an iPhone. The only issue that you may run into is the power requirement. So on on the 4th gen Scarletts, on the Scarlett 2i2, for example, there is a separate optional power connection for USB-C. And so say you wanted to use a Scarlett with your phone, you can connect it to your phone and then power it separately, and then you'd be able to use it that way. The only issue is the power. So you can use a Scarlett with your phone and then use an app like GarageBand. And yeah, you'll be able to pretty much do a lot of what we're doing here on your phone with GarageBand. Okay, recording from the computer into the Focusrite, and then again the phone. Yeah, so I think if you can clarify that a little bit further, or if you have any further questions, I'll be happy to talk about it a little bit more, maybe towards the end. So for now, let's get right back into finishing up laying down the foundations of this track. So we're going to go ahead and add one more instrument track for our bass guitar sound. So we'll go to New. We'll go to a stereo track. We want an instrument track this time, and we're going to call it bass. Now, I have a couple options here as far as how to get a bass guitar sound. So very similar to my piano and the piano and the drums, we need some kind of instrument. Otherwise, my keyboard's not going to make any noise. And so I'm going to go ahead and now a lot of different DAWs will have their own instruments built in. So for example, ProTools has the Expand 2 instrument, and there's some bass guitar sounds in there. And then also we have another option for us is the massive synthesizer that's included with the Scarlett Hitmaker expansion package. So we're going to use that for now. But if you're in Pro Tools, you can go ahead and try Expand 2 as well. Logic Pro has a lot of different instrument sound, most DAWs these days have some sort of bass guitar sound you can use. But yeah, we're going to try using Massive for now. So Massive is a classic synth plugin actually has a massive amount of presets in there. But I went through this earlier and found a nice, it's called Physical Model 01, and that sounds like a bass guitar for now. So let's go ahead and enable that track, and we have a nice little synthesizer bass part there. So if I lower the octave on that, pretty decent bass sound. So we'll stick with that, and let's go ahead and see what we can come up with for a bass part on this track. So here's our keyboard again. Here it is. There we go. All right, let's give it a shot. So like I did earlier, I just recorded the 2 bars of that because I'm going to just go ahead and repeat it, copy paste it over. But before I do that, I want to do the same thing I did earlier with the quantization. So let's go ahead and just double click that, brings up the edit window down here. And these notes are all selected, but if they weren't, I can go Control A, select them all. And then I'll go over here to Event Operations, Quantize, and I'm going to try the default settings, see how that works for me. And let's see how that sounds. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Great, so I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this over. Okay, and so yeah, now we have basically the start of a track. So the way I'm envisioning this is maybe, we're starting off with the chorus or the hook. Kind of maybe here. I'll turn that bass down a little bit. I just had it loud so we could check it. And then maybe here another 2 bars of it. And then that would kind of go into a verse part, I feel like, from there. So I'm going to trim all this up kind of right to here. And we have, everything looks nice. And I think, let's see what we could use for a verse part. I think let's go back to this addictive drums like I mentioned earlier. There was that other part we talked about. Here we go, the eighth closed hi-hats that I can bring in. So let's go ahead and bring those in over here. And we'll just take our acoustic maybe and just bring that over for now. Whoops. And then just to give you an idea, we're going to probably continue this next part where we kind of flush out the song a little bit more. But then just to give you an idea of how we can kind of get started, let's hear how that transition sounds. And of course, we can bring our bass part over too. Now, keys would probably be good there, right? Let's check that out. So yeah, now we have a nice little beginning of a track here. We can start off with our hook. There's our verse. And yeah, I think that's probably a pretty decent place to kind of take a pause and maybe answer any questions if anyone has any about anything we've done so far, recording guitars, just setting up a recording session in general, maybe some of the instruments that we're using. Happy to talk about any of those things for sure. And like I said, we're in the following parts to come, we're going to be flushing this out a little bit more. We'll work on some vocal parts. We'll probably bring in some vocal samples from Splice. Maybe I'll record a vocal sample or two for us to mess with. And we'll play around with the vocals, and then we'll work with mixing. We'll talk about how to make all these tracks, sit nicely together in a mix. So we'll talk about things like equalization, compression, and all that kind of fun stuff. So we'll be arranging the track a little bit more. We'll be mixing the track, and we'll probably add in a few final elements, maybe some vocal samples, maybe some other synthesizer pads or something like that from Splice. We'll get into all that kind of fun stuff in the parts to come. But yeah, any other questions on what we have here so far?
Yeah, John, I have a question here. How do you know how much to add in? I mean, I guess it's kind of probably a hard question to answer, but it's like, how much is too much, or what's the thought process that goes into, okay, am I just layering too much on top of one another, or how simple do you want to go? What's your thought process behind that?
That's a really good question, because that certainly can you can start to get carried away really quickly, right? So, yeah, I mean, for me, I think everyone has a different approach to it. I kind of tend to lay down a lot of things, and then I'll go back and take things away and kind of build it back up that way. But yeah, it's definitely important, and that's kind of the whole arranging aspect that I want to talk about a little bit more next week as well. But definitely this week, as far as, you don't want to have, I mean, like right now, it's kind of like everything is kind of hitting you on this track in the beginning, and that's not always ideal, right? So we'll probably try to spread some of these elements out as we arrange the track. So, like for example, we probably don't need this keyboard maybe here. Maybe we just want the keys to be in the verse, or maybe I don't want an acoustic to be in the chorus and I just want it in the verse. So a lot of times I'll layer a bunch of stuff in there. And then I'll start removing stuff. But there's a lot that's just one approach you can take. But yes, it's definitely possible to get carried away.
And when you're removing stuff, is there like a way? Because I know, I mean, it's that similar timeline thing to like Adobe Premiere, where, okay, if I put a clip in and then I decide, all right, I'm going to go a different direction, I can move it to another layer, so to speak, or, another line, and not have it show. And then if I want to pull it back in, is there any way, workflow wise, Are you deleting stuff out? If you're like, okay, that keyboard, I don't want it in here anymore. Or what if you're like, I don't think I want that keyboard in. I want to take it out, but I might want to revert back to my initial train of thought and have that keyboard in there. How do you handle that workflow?
Typically, there's different things you can do. You can hide. Yeah, I will be honest. Pro Tools isn't my like number one DAW of choice. So this is a great. You're actually bringing up something that's a workflow thing. So this is where DAWs really kind of are a little bit different, right? So they all have different ways of kind of dealing with this. I know in Logic that I use a little bit more, you can like hide different folders, but a lot of times for something when I'm just being creative like this, I'm pretty rudimentary about it. Like I'll just create another track and maybe just hide this one up here and mute it. I'm not afraid to kind of just delete stuff and it's a little bit messy, but yeah, that's just kind of how I do it. I'll create like a lot of like for vocals, for example, I'll usually have a bunch of different vocal tracks and maybe only one of them's active, but I'm pulling things in and out. I know Pro Tools also allows you to do what's called playlists, within a certain track. So you could have different, there's a few different ways to handle that. And I'll try to get into that a little bit more detail on next week when we get into arranging.
Okay. And it looks like we hit a chord there with Pinnell joining us from Vimeo asking, do you feel like Pro Tools is more user friendly than other DAWs? Pros and cons of Pro Tools, what are they?
Oh man, I could really step in it with this one, but I don't know if you're in the audio world, Derek, but it's the same thing in video where people you'll always be arguing about our different programs and which better.
Oh
yeah. The thing I would say about I don't necessarily find Pro Tools to be more user friendly personally, but again, I think that's going to depend on your background. Pro Tools is the industry standard because it's been around the longest. And I think I was having this conversation with my coworker the other day. There's just a lot of workflow in Pro Tools that kind of reflects that. Me coming from the background of working in analog studios and knowing, like, for example, when you make a Pro Tools session, you saw like a lot of the things you kind of have to set up are, if you don't use a template, you're pretty much having to set up everything. You add in your click track. I don't even have a master fader in my session. I have to go in and add that, so that's fine. These are all things I'm used to as someone, but like, from a user-friendly perspective, there's probably more user-friendly options out there, but Pro Tools is just, everyone knows how to use it to some extent. And I think it's super useful to know it at least enough to get around, even if it's not what you're working in every single day, because you're going to find it in most studios.
Yeah, that sounds like video editing for the most part, where it's
Right.
like, you have two main basic camps that everyone goes, and it's like you might dabble over here, but you either use one or the other, and you got to make up your mind because that's the world we live in now. It's like if I don't use it, it's not good. If I use it, it's the best that exists.
Yeah, exactly.
So where are we headed next week? Let's kind of tee it off. Where again, thinking about how you're laying this out. What are the thoughts that go in headed to the next step, or is there anything that you always want to make sure that you check off, or is there anything, I don't know music production. So it's like for me, relating this to video, I'm looking at it as like, okay, I know where I'm going to go 3 steps from now. So I know things that I'll do at this juncture just to make sure that I'm not, or making my job easier down the line and not putting my foot in it.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, I think this phase in today was kind of more all about like the more, well, it's all creative, but maybe the more what you would call the production part of it, or the recording the music, getting the actual ideas down. And then next week we'll get into more of the technical engineering part of it, where I'll start to, to do an analogy with video, we'll get into color grading and things like that. We'll get into equalization and try, for example, those 2 guitar tracks, how do I make them sound better together? Can I use an EQ or a compressor on one versus another, and to make them sit nicely together in the mix? So we'll get into some of those more technical aspects of, we have all these elements, so now how can we make them sit together nicely? That's what we're gonna kind of focus on mostly next week.
Nice. So we laid the foundation today. We're gonna is this kind of like not the boring part, but is this the kind of, all right, we got to do this part to get to the fun stuff? Where's the fun stuff? Like for you, which part out of everything, which part do you enjoy the most?
Oh, it's a really good question. I think it probably. I mean, for me personally, probably. For me personally, I like when things are down and I can start to, because I'm more of an engineer. So like, I mean, I'm of course I am a musician. I play guitar and all that kind of thing. But like, I like having good sounding tracks so I can just get in there and start manipulating them. So for me, the next part, like next week, is the fun part because I have my elements and now I can start to throw them together and get an idea what my final project's going to sound like.
Yeah, when you start seeing it come to life.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
All right. I get that. Well, John, I want to thank you. This is a good start. This when we do events like this, it makes me wish I knew my way around. I love music. I don't know what I'm doing around music. It's fun to watch you play around and kind of I'm sitting here and I'm like, yeah, this is so cool. Yeah, I can't play an instrument, so I'm kind of just stuck. But hey, at least it's fun to watch. And I think it opens up the door for people to see that, especially in the day and age that we live in now, where it's like you could literally pick up some gear, download some software, and just teach yourself, with the help of what we're doing here. This is the stuff that helps get people started.
Yeah, totally. And I'm using instruments and the keyboard controller today, but you don't necessarily have to. There's plenty of people who start producing music by, they start with like a drum loop like I did, like this, and then I can create these MIDI tracks or this, I can create a track for a keyboard just by opening up this piano roll and drawing. You can draw these notes in and do it this way. There's plenty of people most people probably start off, especially the younger generation starts off doing it this way, right? So yeah, I mean, you can get into this today. This Pro Tools intro is free, so you can download this. Some of these extra plugins are with the Scarlett. So, but yeah, you can get started. If you're on a Mac, you got GarageBand there already. There's so many fun ways to get into this.
Yeah, you spoiled younger generation. You guys don't know how good you have it. My dad put a metronome, like an actual metronome, on top of the piano.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Had
was
a few
like,
of those.
yeah. I'm like sitting here and I'm like, wait, when it didn't hit me at first, and I'm hearing the ticking. I'm like, wait, where did I recognize that from? And I'm like, oh, wait, we had an actual like physical metronome.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Times have changed. Well, look, great having you on. A huge thank you to the entire Focusrite team for bringing us this series. Again, next part two, Sculpting Sonic Brilliance, is coming to you live January 17th. That is next Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. So get your questions ready for then. And look, that's all we got for you today. Another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space, now in the books. Catch y'all next time.